Good morning and welcome to the National Newspaper Publishers Association's Let It Be Known. With growing cries for police reform and the high profile deaths of Tyre Nichols, George Floyd, and Breonna Taylor, and so many others leading to protests, there are still those that continue to fly under the radar. This morning, we'll bring you a stunning and equally disturbing case that has now resulted in a lawsuit. Also, a relative of Emmett Till has filed a lawsuit, speaking of lawsuits, seeking a court order for the arrest of a woman at the center of that decades old racist murder. We'll discuss that as well. And a building believed to be the oldest surviving schoolhouse for Black children in the United States was hoisted onto a flatbed truck and moved a half mile to Colonial Williamsburg, a Virginia museum that continues to expand its emphasis on African American history. We discuss all that and more this morning with Cheryl Smith of the Texas Metro News and Bobby Henry of the West Side Gazette down in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Good morning, Cheryl. I see Bobby is still having some difficulties, so we expect him to join us shortly. But how are you?
Good morning. Doing great, and great to see you and
Oh,
be able
always
to
good to see
talk
you.
about everything going on in the world.
Too much, too much. And so, with that same old, it's like, how much can we take? A family is calling, a Black family, let's emphasize that, is calling again for police accountability. Uh, After a New Year's Eve shooting that critically injured a man who had been sleeping in the car in his grandmother's driveway. Now, it happened New Year's Eve, but we're now just finding out about it because of what? Video, dash cam video. Anthony Macklin, who was 24 years old, he fell asleep in a vehicle in front of his grandmother's house on New Year's Eve. Three Indianapolis Metropolitan Police officers woke him up by tapping on the car window. It happened in the 3600 block of North Oxford Street. The police department said Macklin had a gun in his lap and started to move around before officers opened fire, although police weren't sure if he was aiming his gun at them. But according to Macklin's attorneys, officers then opened fire, sending more than 30 rounds into the car. Now, fortunately, they only managed to hit him three times, and he was able to survive. But Cheryl, here's the thing: the grandmother had noticed the car in her driveway at
Mhm.
4 a.m. She was a little bit scared, but in the 911 call, she says, "But it could be one of my children." So the officers arrived. Now let's say this: Macklin did have a gun. However, it was on the passenger seat. He's licensed to carry the gun, right? He was
Right.
asleep. And he said he didn't ring the bell or knock on the door because he didn't want to wake his grandparents at
Logic.
4 in the morning. And as the cops emerge on him, the grandmother could be heard in the video shouting out, "That's my grandson." You know, go ahead, Joe.
And she has to be traumatized because it wasn't my grandson, and I'm traumatized by it. You just think of all these scenarios that police officers could run through their head. He wasn't doing anything violent at the time. He was
Sleep.
asleep. The time, I he showed home training because I wouldn't have went knocking on my grandma's door at 4 in the morning.
Right.
I don't knock on a door and I don't call at 4 in the morning because it has been long standing that at 4 in the morning you getting a phone call is not usually a good thing.
Right.
And
Right.
so this is like really disturbing that just like when it's us involved, how district attorneys can layer on the charges and be very creative with coming up with more and more charges to enhance the possibility of a guilty verdict. Um, these police officers could have used some common sense. And what were they doing? Even if they stayed there till it was daylight,
Right.
and
Right.
then if they saw the gun inside. So, again, the accountability that we're talking about that needs to happen is not there. And it's very frustrating. Looking at this picture of this young man and I have to say, when is it gonna stop?
Right.
Somebody tell me, what do we need to do to make this nightmare, this continuous nightmare, stop?
Yeah. Yeah. Again, this young man sitting in his grandmother's driveway, 4 in the morning. He didn't want to wake them up, so he fell asleep there. And I don't want to presume anything, but he likely had his gun, as they say, on the passenger seat. He was again licensed to carry it. At 4 in the morning, he probably was concerned about his safety. Those officers banged on the window, woke him up suddenly. His attorneys say they want the full body cam video released because the cops are saying that he raised the gun. The family said, and you can hear in the video too, that the part that has been released, that gun was obviously not in his possession at the time. They saw it, they reacted. Listen, the bottom line is Bobby Henry. They saw a black man
Yeah,
and they reacted.
yeah, yeah. A black man with a gun. Uh, I don't know if you ever been to Indianapolis or Indiana. I'm not sure what part of town he was in, but at 4 o'clock in the morning, sleeping in the car, if I had a license to carry, I would have my firearm too. You know,
Yeah, it's like Cheryl said too. Where when will they ever be accountability? You do get the officers, and like in the Tyre Nichols case, they immediately arrested, fired, and facing second-degree murder charges that may eventually be bumped up, but to first-degree murder. But this is a disease that has been going on forever in America.
what is the standard operating procedure? Uh, uh, yeah, I don't. And good morning, first of all. Let me just say that. And I apologize for the technical difficulties, but yes, Stacy. Ever since the slave catcher, this attitude, this mentality has been pervasive. Now, I do believe that if we meaning as it pertains to the police, if there was in place from the psychological aspect before the person even becomes a police officer, if we could get in front of that and perhaps prevent some of the at least prevent some of that mentality from being so pervasive by not allowing it to even become a part of the force.
Well, that's a good point, Bobby. But if you think about the case of the Tatiana Jefferson, that police officer was deemed not suitable, and also when you consider the hiring pool out there now and the shortage of police officers, the shortage of good people to make a good Big Mac,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know, that we're living with. Some people, more and more folks are going to slip through the cracks. And that is very unfortunate because the accountability is not there in terms of making sure that they understand there is a penalty.
you know,
Mhm.
yeah, and also too, when we think about that, I would dare to say I haven't checked the statistics, but the majority of police force perhaps come from the military, and that mindset of being in the military, especially coming if you were engaged in a war zone, your mentality is to come home, and by any means necessary. So if you're coming on a police force and you haven't adapted to civilian life, then 9 times out of 10 you're gonna still be in the same mode of war, if you will,
Mhm.
and the enemy.
Yeah,
So
it was a problem,
yeah,
but the problem with that, Bobby, is that when there's a difference. They when it comes to, and we've seen this time and again, this is not just rhetoric. This is not just conjecture. We've seen it constantly that when the suspect or the individual that they're responding to is African American, the immediate the first default is to shoot. When
mm,
it's We've seen videos that have gone viral where the suspect or the person they respond to is white, that have actually raised weapons at
yes,
the officers, have actually physically, verbally, and otherwise menaced officers, and they were able to get in the back. Listen,
Yeah.
Dylan Roof shot up the church down south, and they put him in the they put him in the police car and took him to Burger King.
They still see them as human. And Bobby, to your point, and according to the Justice Department, there are about 25% of the total force has a military background. But if you look at those careers, look at careers in the military, police, and especially um, the officers in prisons.
Mm-hmm.
Heavy violence, heavy violence.
Mm-hmm.
And in some areas, they pull from the neighborhood where they are. And a lot of our prisons are in rural areas. And
Mhm.
so you get Bubba and Pookie,
Mm-hmm.
wielding their power and influence over folks. And that's where you hear of a lot of domestic violence.
Mhm.
And you also get, it was the Klan running to be police officers and the officers, detention officers, and the like, who feel like they are working with animals, and that's how we get treated. The going to get a burger is showing an act of humanity, and we don't get shown that act often.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it may sound funny, but I hear what Power 96 writes in from YouTube. He says, I hate to say this, but I'd rather call it crackhead instead of a police. When you call the police, you have a 50-50 chance of survival, especially as a black person. So with that in mind, Cheryl and Bobby, you're both distinguished publishers of some really fantastic newspapers, the West Side Gazette down in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, Bobby, and Cheryl, of course, the Texas Metro News and Garland Journal and iMessenger Media out in Texas. How do you guys cover these things, and how do you want your reporters to cover this? Because mainstream media will give you some of this, they'll give, but is there a different way? I brought this up to Denise Rolock Barnes of the Washington Informer just yesterday. Is there a way that we in the black press should be looking at this, and not just reporting that officers again shot a black person down?
Mm-hmm.
How would you like that as publishers? How should we be covering this?
Sure, you want to go first?
Sure, that's a very interesting question,
Mm-hmm.
because there are so many ways we need to be covering how we deal with crime in America. For example, there are some papers, and I know you have seen it, where some papers thrive on running mug shots of um, mostly black defendants, I'll call them.
Mhm.
And with that in mind, we probably really need to look at showing more of the Derek Chauvins of the world and putting them on blast and embarrassing their families and their communities. There are so many ways we need to look at highlighting
Mm-hmm.
those bad officers. They say there are only a few. Let me tell you, they're getting away with
Mm-hmm.
murder. The folks who get away with murder, in fact, the ones who get not guilty verdicts, we need to do a better job of putting them on forefront, embarrassing them. And I know you mentioned Carolyn Bryant with the vicious murder of Emmett Till. You know, we need to have our own critical race theory going on in our
Mm-hmm.
publications and digitally, and making sure that, just like we say we came from kings and queens, we need to let Carolyn Bryant's descendants know where they came from, and
Mhm.
constantly put them on blast and spotlight them.
Okay.
And that will have an impact in a number of ways. And it also makes sure we don't forget, because we tend to forget.
Mhm. And Cheryl, in the same vein, the understanding, like you just said, the understanding of the victim, but more so the perpetrator, the actual person. Yeah, we need to focus in on that and deal with what that mentality. What would cause a person to shoot up a car 30 times, or Tamir Rice, or what is the mentality of that? And let's focus in on that, as opposed to all of the black crime. No,
Mhm.
what is it? That's what I would like to see us focus on. What
Uh,
is it?
how how
You
how about you know, Greer sent me an article yesterday. We talked about this on the program yesterday. Lynn Fitch, who is the Attorney General of in Mississippi.
Oh
Uh,
shit! Shoot.
right. Very, very look, she claims it, we can say it, very racist. Came from a very racist family. In fact, her family is the ones who started the Ku Klux Klan. Her family, I think it was her grandfather was the first grand wizard of the Ku Klux Klan. Um, we know Mississippi is now passed a law in which it pertains to mostly black Jackson, Mississippi, in which they're going to have two separate justice systems, one for white folks, one for black folks. In 2023,
Yeah.
we're not in 1953 or 1940, in 2023. But the Daily Beast, and you got to give credit where credit is due, right? It's a white media, and it's rare that they do this, but the Daily Beast did a deep dive into her and her history and what's driving this. And this is where I was kind of going when I spoke to Denise yesterday, and I'm speaking to you today. Um, as the black press, we still are counted on as the trusted voice. And certainly, if you think about it, we're not only a trusted voice in the black community, we're just a trusted voice, period. Because let's face it, people understand what mainstream is all about,
Mhm.
right? It is degenerated into just clickbait. We're not that, and we're never going to be that. Certainly, as long as we have folks like Cheryl Smith, and you, Bobby Henry, and certainly Claudette Perry is watching, folks like that, and Dr. Chavis at the helm of the NMPA, right? Uh, but we have to. I'm thinking, as the senior national correspondent for the Black Press of America, we have to reimagine how we cover it. We talk about reimagining the police, I think we have to reimagine how we cover this to humanize our victims. These black victims, African American victims, they're not humanized. They're objects.
Yeah.
They're made out to be objects.
And Stacy, this is where we come in and grooming the next generation of journalists. The fact that what's happening when we begin to assimilate, when black folk begin to be like other people, we have totally forgotten about the human part of us. So when we do that, we do the same thing that they do, even in reporting the news. We forget about the
Yep.
human side of what we're doing. We're trying to be clicks and if it bleeds, it leads, and that whole sort of thing,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to presenting the human side of the news and its victims. We're at fault in doing that. When we
Well,
allow
it's some simple things, Bobby, that we can do. Like even today, there are folks they do not remember the names of the officers in the case, but guess what? They call it the Rodney King trial.
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
And
yeah,
sometimes we do that. The Tatiana trial, the Botham John, and none of those should have been on. They were not on trial, and they shouldn't have been. But we frame things in folks' mind. We have to do a better job. But unfortunately, this is talking to a young journalism student yesterday, and she's going to grad school to get her degree in psychology. And I am hoping that that will have an impact on her writing as she covers crime and look at the psyche of some of these folks who are out there supposedly to protect and serve, and while there's a dual system, and also but it's at the top because we look at watching State of the Union address, and I've long said I think they shouldn't be separated in there because they look idiotic, and the idiocy of it was shown in the movie with Bernie Mac and Chris Rock, where when Chris Rock was running for president, and every time he
Mm-hmm.
said something that was favorable, that side would stand up, and then the other one, you
mhm,
know, those folks representing us in Congress and in the Senate are looking like idiots.
Mm-hmm.
But we aren't calling them out as that, and we aren't holding them as accountable as we need to. And it has to start somewhere, but it's so prevalent with the hurt that Black America is feeling. Guess who we're attacking?
Each other.
Mhm.
one another.
Well,
Yeah.
I will tell you this, Cheryl, that the antics that Marjorie Taylor Greene and others pulled at the State of the Union, um, look at the Newswire, look at Black Press USA, look at what I wrote.
Hmm.
We didn't hold back.
Hmm.
We called them out as idiots, like you said. We called them out as acting childish and read the article.
And we definitely we encourage everybody to. And I told you last night I was with the Honorable Hakeem Jeffries, Jasmine Crockett, and Eddie Bernice Johnson, and they talked about it. They talked about gun violence. They talked about the issues that we're dealing with. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett talked about immigration a little, but um, Representative Jeffries talked about, the recent shooting. We've had another shooting on a college campus.
Yeah.
And, these, I think there are signs. America is sick. And you all were at the
Critically sick.
NNPA convention in Puerto Rico. I don't know if you felt different being in Puerto Rico, but I did. I was less stressed.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Shirley, let me back up for a moment. You said America is sick. Now that old saying, when America gets the cold, black folk get the flu. Now, if America is sick, then black folk we're on life support, and it's
Yes.
obvious. It's obvious that there is more to this than I'm not gonna put any. I won't diminish any life. I won't do that. We're here in Broward County with this Valentine Day massacre at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas. So that's happening.
Mm.
So I won't devalue any life. But what I will say, when it comes to being on life support or survival, we are apt at doing anything to survive. Even if that means killing one another, you know,
Mhm.
whether we got on a blue uniform or not, it seems not to matter. It seems that it's now the survival mode. We're going to do whatever it takes to survive, and that is evident by what is happening not only in our legislature, not only on the police force,
Mhm.
even amongst our leadership. We got a march going on tomorrow in Tallahassee about our crazy governor and his state woke policy. But how is it that we're going to have a march in Tallahassee, but we haven't galvanized the people in a local region to get up to the march? What
Mm.
the hell are we doing? Are we just photo opting? Are we really concerned, or are we just doing something to put our name out there? Oh, this leader here, or this
Mhm.
legislative person here, but not the common people, not those that are really affected by this stuff that's going on.
Yeah,
And we'd like for
we
them
have.
to get engaged, but that's one thing that happens, that we have a tendency to not. They say let the hit dog holler, but we need people to holler when we see a dog getting hit,
That's right.
and we need to get engaged and involved. And I want to point to something, because we were having a discussion that we turn on each other, and I just hear the commentary about folks constantly criticizing. We're getting Cheryl Lee Ralph getting criticized to
Rihanna
sit
getting
and lift
criticized.
Mm.
every voice and sing, and we join in there and participate. I'd like to just throw a call out there, which I'm going to tell you one of my favorite songs. Hip hop is celebrating the 50th anniversary, but
Yes.
Donny Hathaway's "Someday We'll All Be Free,"
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
celebrating 50 years. And I look at people like Ben Crump, and I want to say in April Ryan also, because we don't know, and we need to share those stories. We don't know that while there are people loving them, there are people hating on them. There, when April Ryan was going through all of that with Trump, she had security, 24-hour security on her. And so you say our people have to deal with this, and then they have to deal with the crazies out there, and she's dealing with the crazies, Trump, and then she has to deal with some of us telling her she need to shut her mouth. And so we add to those who are taking us
Mhm.
down. And the same thing with Ben Crump. They say he hasn't won any cases. He doesn't try the cases they're talking about. The cases he's talking about, he gets large settlements
Mhm.
for his family. So we just look. We still have the mentality where if we see three men and black men laying on the ground, because they do that to us more than anybody, laying on the ground, we ride by and say, what did they do? Instead of thinking that possibly they didn't do anything and it's the police that did something.
Okay,
We got
sure.
to change our mindset.
Okay, you said this. Okay, when I'll use the church as an example. We always talk about what the church is not doing. Or this the church is doing this, and the church is doing. Who makes up the church? We do. So we're the ones. We're not flipping that mirror around and looking at it. You know, yeah, I really uh, harbor on our leadership or lack thereof. Because people we look to leadership for examples or advice on how the common person can do some things, and that is a point of contention. When we separate and work in silos, that ain't no good for nobody. So
Yeah, I think and Cheryl, I certainly appreciate her point because, um, and I'm not going to trivialize it at all by saying this, but like you mentioned, Cheryl Lee Ralph, and then I'm hearing so many black men. I'm seeing it on social media criticize Rihanna, saying that it's stuff like this. She should have left her pregnant butt home and things like, you know, as a black woman, a pregnant black woman, you know, Cheryl, what y'all have to go through um, on a daily basis. I just recall Serena Williams' story of giving birth um, as a global superstar, being ignored by her doctors, saying, basically writing her off as a black woman just complaining. Um, you
mm,
know, Rihanna took that stage. You may not like Rihanna. You may not like her. I don't know the words to none of her songs, but I like her as an individual, right? Her music I can do with or without her music. But the fact is, watching her put that effort in, and people say, well, it wasn't much effort to be a pregnant person, a pregnant black woman, to get up there and really show your brand off the way she did. Don't hate on it. If you didn't like it, it's not your cup of tea. It's not your cup of tea. But I don't think that it does anybody any good, for black men in particular, to be out here um, downing her when
Right.
listen. Let's keep it real. She didn't take her clothes off, show her
yeah,
butt, show her breast. There was no reveal of the breast. She revealed her baby bump, but that's her business.
yeah,
That we
We
should be
can't we
proud of. That we should be
Right,
proud of. If you've
right.
seen the movie Sankofa, and I brought Holly Garima to my journalism workshop when it first came out, they talked about the womb, the how precious that is, and we have to stop feeding negativity into those who are about to come out in the world. And I'm so tired of the disrespect of black women, because so much so that we disrespect one another. I shut a sister down yesterday because she tried to make friction between an outgoing elected official and the woman who was coming in, and I said, stop that drama. I said, you you need to focus on something else. And that is where, conversations, how do you make it better when we don't think highly of ourselves, when we
Hmm.
are not making a way for ourselves? The movie Claudine, and you've heard me say
Oh,
how
yes.
one of my favorite ones
One of
before.
the best soundtracks in music and movie
Oh,
history.
yeah,
yes. And Cicely Tyson was offered that role that Diane Carroll played. And I think Diane Carroll played it admirably. And I
Hmm.
love the movie. And I think about, the welfare mother today, that
Hmm.
we still have them, but we don't have the programs that were in place back then, where they said you had to work. And there used to be in the late 90s welfare to work programs, where if you get people to buy in and make these women, give them an opportunity to see their value. We have to do that with our men and our women. And I think we can do that with our media, and I did a forum with Color of Change and BET, and I said in that forum that I had 4 points I wanted to appear in my publications. I wanted something on COVID. I wanted something on social justice. I wanted something on opportunities, and then I wanted a feel good story.
Mhm.
And so they asked, don't you think feel good is a distraction? I said, no. And all this mess we were dealing with, we have to balance it out.
Mhm.
And so we have to celebrate the marriages
Mhm.
in our community, because you talk to young people, young Black people, if you talk to and I've had to do this in classes, and I've asked, we are the least likely to say that we want to get married.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, sure. Sure. I'm back. I think all men should at one time or another be in a birthing room when a woman is
Mm.
bringing to this
Mhm.
world. That your whole perspective changes. And then we just did a series on human trafficking, and we got an event coming up next week where we're going to preview premiere a film. But to understand the plight of a woman, especially a Black woman, and her struggles and where she tries to find her identity between her man and life, and here we are looking at it from one perspective and one perspective only, not
Mhm.
taking into the total picture. Yeah, for Rihanna to be on stage pregnant, bringing life, she also was sharing everything she had to offer with the
Mhm.
audience. And that's what I took from that. You
Yeah,
know,
Power
yeah.
96
Mhm.
writes in from YouTube, we have to keep it real. Some Black men will say and do anything for white acceptance. Self-hate is real in the Black community. And Aunt Pam, you're late. They'll be coming in late, Aunt Pam. My aunt is watching, Bobby. She's
Yeah.
late. She's a Beyonce fan, so I'm sure she probably didn't even watch Rihanna.
Mhm.
But Mike V says Republicans cut the social program, and Trump was the last president to do so. He cut Pell Grant that 75% of Black men and women rely on for college. So we know what we have to do. And here's the bottom line as we wrap up of police reform or the police misconduct. We talk a lot about police reform and police misconduct on this program. Obviously, the Black press in general has to talk a lot about that. Why? Because we can't rely on someone else to tell the story. Our founder said, "What we wish to plead our own cause,
That's right.
because for too long others have spoken for us." We have to keep that in the forefront. It's important. And that's why we talked, Cheryl and Bobby, a little bit about what our publishers, our publishers, how you want us to cover this, because it's vital that we keep this at the forefront. And look, this topic that we're going to talk about now, Cheryl, a relative of Emmett Till is suing to try to make a Mississippi sheriff serve a 1955 arrest warrant on a white woman in the
Mhm.
kidnapping that led to Emmett Till's lynching. The torture and killing of Emmett Till in the Mississippi Delta, of course, was the catalyst for the civil rights movement after his mother insisted on an open casket funeral in Chicago, and Jet magazine, the Black press, published photos of his mutilated body. Some say, Cheryl, that the Emmett Till's family should just give it up, just leave it alone. Um, I'm sure we have a different take on that.
We have to, and I can tell you, I had the pleasure of being with Mrs. Teal Mobley Bradley, being with her, brought her to Dallas, and spent like 4 days. She spent 4 days with me here, and folks want you to give up things till it involves them, and there again is that hit dog holler. I think that it should be something that we should be showing, just like we show Emmett Till's picture. We should embarrass the heck out of folks like Carolyn Bryant by having the picture of her then, and her grandkids may not, and great grandkids may not recognize her from that picture that we're showing now. Show pictures of her then and now,
Mhm.
and let them have to. If enough of us, could you imagine if 200 of our papers put her on the front page, and retold that story all at the same time, could
Yeah.
you imagine what kind of impact it would have on people who know her? And and it calls for some bold actions from us, but that's why we were founded, to
Yeah.
be bold.
Yeah. If they can, if law enforcement, if the judicial system can go back and put a person in prison for a crime that they perhaps escaped over the years, then I
Mhm.
think too that this should be the case for her. You know, uh, even if she doesn't go to prison, the fact that she would be tried for a crime that she committed, and
Yes.
whatever that is. And yeah, we should put it all on front pages. You
Mhm.
know,
Yeah,
It's
you're right.
interesting
But
because we have in Dallas where a father is going to jail. And get this, he's like 34 years old. And his because he drove his son to a convenience store where his son killed three young guys. And his son, the shooter, is on the run. And but the father got capital murder, life in prison at 34 for being an accomplice. She was an accomplice in the murder of Emmett Till.
yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
And she knew she was lying. And, and there are just so many and she is from a protected class in America.
yeah.
She's from a protected class. You protect the white woman at any cost. And we gotta, I don't know what will change it, but I do know that we could continue. We could make, if she doesn't go to prison, we could make her life a living hell wherever she is. Because it's something, you just think about it. If you've ever been in the paper for something negative, it's not a good
It's
feeling.
not a good, not at all. Has she ever even offered an apology? Has she? Is it
No,
anywhere? Okay, then Cheryl, you're absolutely right. How far is Money, Mississippi from Jackson, Mississippi?
Oh, that's interesting. We need to check that. You want to go on a road trip?
So yeah, let's do that. And in the words of Nina Simone in that song about Mississippi.
Mm.
Mhm.
my sister brought that up yesterday. But you know what? Here's the thing. So Mississippi, right? She'll never get convicted in Mississippi.
Hmm.
No.
It's there she is, Show.
Yeah,
It's hard.
Oh
You
Lord.
you
And I
know,
and I don't feel any empathy, and that's the
none.
same, or sympathy, and that's the same way police officers look at us a lot of times. They
but
don't see.
but
I was thinking about that when we were in Puerto Rico because I looked at um my grandbaby, and she was running all over the place, and all you heard was cute, cute. And I thought about even little black boys there, thought it's cute, cute. I'm like, what age do they become monsters? What age do she
hmm,
become a hoe? And
yeah,
what age do we start demonizing our our people?
yeah,
And you
sure.
talk
Mhm.
about, it's like 93 miles from Money to Jackson.
Okay, put Emmett Till's picture in the casket up with her picture.
Mm.
Now
Wow.
let's
Mm.
look at that.
That's pretty powerful,
Here,
Bobby.
just think about that. And you hope that some people at some point want to make good and make right with their maker, and say something. I just look how, Mrs. Mobley, how she went to her grave doing things to help other young kids, when she had the Emmett Till nonprofit. And just how beautiful she was. And we end up making so many, we're getting to see the beauty in so many women, Sabrina Fulton, all these mothers out of tragedy, and
Mhm.
that's not the way it's supposed to be.
Right.
Let's see
Exactly.
if she could be um, 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 uh, made to do some community service. You know, if let's if there has to be something good that comes out of this.
Mhm.
You know, had there has to be. So
Mhm.
in trying to find that good for what she did,
Yeah. You
in
know,
Yeah.
Again, I always enjoy the takes that Power 96 has and others. He writes that I personally blame the LaFleur County District Attorney Dwayne Richardson, a black man. He doesn't need a grand jury to indict her. He really does. He certainly doesn't. He says, arrest that old hag. Mike V makes a great point. He says, Israel put Nazi soldiers in jail at 99 years old with Alzheimer's.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
They don't care. You did
And
the.
we don't make them care
Mhm.
because folks will say they should have known better. And I did a piece on the talk where I had different people talking about the talk they either had with their children, and there was one woman who wrote about she didn't have to have a talk with them, with her young son, and she's a white woman, and she said, and he wears a hoodie every day and she doesn't worry the least bit. And I say, guys, why can't we grow up in a world where our children don't have to worry about something? Back to the gun, I don't care. I think the outcome would have been pretty much the same whether he had a gun or not.
Oh, without question. And listen, remember this woman in the case of Emmett Till. Remember, there was an arrest warrant for her, and this is what the LaFleur County Sheriff at the time in 1955 told reporters that he did not want to bother her because she was raising two young children.
Mm. Mm.
So there was an active arrest warrant, but the authority said, "Listen, don't bother that woman. She's raising two children." Wow. Just wow, right? She's now in her late 80s, but she's not raising two young children now.
No.
That was the
E-
list,
No.
right?
Exactly. That's the point. And someone's Mike V said about spending $1 million on billboards. Even if you're talking about putting up her picture or putting up these these folks who kill black people, um I'd rather use that money for us, for our it's like, even sometimes there have been black organizations and folks who have said, well, I'm going to go take out a full page in the New York Times or the Washington Post or something like that. Do you realize how much those ads cost? And do you also realize how much how many black newspapers it would help? And I think we would get the traction if we started doing they making that orchestrated, hard push down, if you will, on these folks. And you have always felt like a victim, because she's probably being abused. See, look at
Yeah.
that. I like, she's probably being abused by her
Yeah.
husband because he
But
looks like he.
if there is such a thing as a moral court, perhaps we should
Yeah.
bring her. Yeah, yeah. See, now put that picture up against hers, but let's bring her into a moral court and have her, to be subjected to the pain and agony of what the Till family and we went through. So
Yeah.
what?
Well, Cheryl and Bobby, a building believed to be the oldest
Yeah.
surviving schoolhouse for black children in the United States was hoisted onto a flatbed truck and moved half a mile uh, to Colonial Williamsburg, a Virginia museum that continues to expand its emphasis on African American history. The original structure, built 25 years before the American Revolution, stood near the college campus of William and Mary. The Pinewood building held as many as 30 students at a time, some of them free black children studying alongside those who were enslaved. Hundreds of people lined the streets to celebrate its slow speed trip into the heart of the Living History Museum, which tells the story of Virginia's colonial capital through interpreters and restored buildings. They all this talk about critical race theory, and then we see what the governor down there, Bobby in Florida, is doing. We see what the governor up in Texas, Cheryl, is doing, and other Republican states banning books. They banned the book about Roberto Clemente simply because he talked in the book about the oppression he faced as a child. Um, this school building, there's a lot of history there. Bobby,
Yeah.
Cheryl, the thought of preserving such a great piece of history like that. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, that's so important. And Bobby, I'll let you elaborate on
Okay.
that because our history, we can't be blaming others for not telling our stories
Right.
because we have the vehicles and we have to do it. And if we're going to tell it the same way other folks are saying or telling it, or if we were going to wait for them, if we're
Mhm.
going to wait for them to tell the stories, we'll be waiting forever. And
Yeah.
so I kind of think that the significance of this can't be lost on us in a time where we have people who are constantly saying, you had those people who came from basically nothing, stressing the importance of education. And now we have us, the descendants, saying, well, college ain't for everybody. We need to celebrate and we need to tell our story and say, to hell with those who are not telling our story. I could focus my energy on them, or I could focus on doing the things I need to do so we could tell the story, so that we could have the community forums that bring people together in a way to talk about education and to engage people in telling the rich history of us. The bad thing about it is if you just think about it, everybody who was of age say they marched with Dr. King, and
Yes.
you look at the criticism that Dr. King got. And that's what we deal with. The people who do step out there sometimes, Bobby, and
Yeah.
say, I am going to be a leader. Those are the ones that get ostracized the most
Yeah.
by us trying to outwhite white folks against black folks.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna back up. That school building, that schoolroom. How old is that building?
That before the Revolution, American Revolution, that was, gosh, it's real old. It's the Thomas Bray School, by
Okay.
the way.
So and how old is the black press?
The Black Press is
196.
196
Okay.
years
So
old.
now, so here we have history. Okay. So they're preserving a building. Just as they're preserving the building, we need to be preserving the black press. You know, the our history is the history of the world. And
Hmm.
if we allow um, um, Governor DeSatan and any other Cheryl's governor, any other person to
That's my governor.
try to cover up, bury our history, then again we are at fault.
Right,
Yes.
Our black
right.
churches can create places to teach black history,
Like they
and,
did in the
and
past.
exactly. Now, what happens if we parents who have school age children say, well, my children are not going to school, period. If you're not going to teach history, we're not going to school. So
Hmm.
there are things that we can do to address these issues.
Hmm.
But if
Yeah.
we don't meet collectively to come up with a plan, we're going to be all over the place, as opposed to honing in straight to the point, to where the issue is, and deal with that. No, Governor DeSatan, you can put whatever, but we're not going to go to school. We'll homeschool our kids. We'll do this. We'll do that.
And we see
But
more and more African Americans being homeschooled too.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So
So
there are ways to combat that which we are confronted with. You know,
yeah,
we've did it before. We've come a long ways through a whole lot of adversity. This ain't nothing.
Hmm.
I mean, this. If we take that mentality as opposed to being wimps, to laying down, oh, woe is me, stand up. We've been through it before. Look at it. This there's nothing new. Yeah, we got new, perhaps some milk toast leaders, but the majority of the army is strong and ready to fight.
hmm,
So as it pertains to that black school, yeah, I say congratulations. Yeah, restore it, but just remember and teach what it was all about.
yep.
We
And
didn't
that's
we
the
didn't
point.
just stop there and bow down. We
Yep,
raised up. You
that's
know.
the point. Bobby Henry closes us out really well today.
hmm
Stand up,
My
he said.
classmate.
hmm They say it's hard for a man to ride your back when you're standing up. And we
See,
forget,
that
man.
was our. We
But I
just gave. The
Stacy.
NNPA just gave Dr. Chavis the 2023 Lifetime Achievement Award. Bobby Henry was the 2022 NNPA Lifetime Achievement Award recipient. Of course, Cheryl is a NABJ Hall of Famer. So we got some great company this morning. We appreciate both of y'all, and we appreciate the work you do, and the West Side Gazette and Texas Metro News and Garland Journal. We appreciate you guys so much. Cheryl and Bobby, thanks so much for joining us this morning and having really what is a spirited discussion that we need and we need to have often. So thank you so much. Thank you all for watching Let It Be Known, and we'll see you again tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.